Story: The Teeth Collector. The First Tooth. She found the first one on a Wednesday. It was wedged between the bristles of her toothbrush like a gruesome joke. Still slick. Still warm. Rachel blinked at it in the bathroom mirror, her brain grasping for logic. Maybe it was hers. Maybe she'd somehow loosened one in her sleep. But when she ran her tongue across her gum line, top row, bottom row, every tooth was there. No bleeding, no gap. Just the dull throb of confusion blooming behind her eyes. She rinsed it. Away. Down the drain. Simple. But that night she dreamed of chewing, not food, no, not anything like food. The dream was tactile, grating, gritty. Something cracked, something ground down. When she woke, there was a pressure in her jaw like she'd been clenching for hours. The next morning, there were 2 more teeth on her pillow, 1 molar, 1 incisor, both intact. She stared at them for a long time. This wasn't a prank. She lived alone. No visitors, no pets, no neighbors close enough to even think of something this strange. By the end of the week, there were 7 teeth. Different shapes, some with silver fillings, 1 clearly a child's. That was when Rachel started checking her own reflection differently. She opened her mouth wider, pulled at her cheeks, counted again and again, all 32. Still there, but something behind her smile had changed. Chapter 1. A Bitter Taste. Rachel Brennan lived in a second-floor apartment above an old bookshop that always smelled like mildew and forgotten time. It was the kind of place where the floors creaked even when no one walked on them, and the walls hummed in the dead of night. She liked it because it was quiet, anonymous, and cheap. A trifecta for someone who preferred not to be noticed. She worked from home, editing medical transcripts for a remote agency, which meant her life was neatly partitioned into headphones, foot pedals, and hours of speech-to-text corrections. It was repetitive but dependable. No drama, no interaction, just the way she liked it, until the teeth. After the 7th one appeared, Rachel started logging each discovery in a leather-bound notebook she kept under her bed, not because she thought anyone would believe her, but because she needed to prove to herself that it was real, tangible, documented. Tooth number 1, Wednesday, April the 3rd, found in toothbrush tooth number 2 and number 3, Thursday, April 4th, found on pillow tooth number 4, Saturday, April 6th, found in kitchen sink tooth number 5. Sunday, April 7th, found in left shoe tooth number 6. Monday, April 8th, found on bookshelf tooth number 7. Tuesday, April 9th, found in cereal box. She kept them in a small glass jar. At first she thought about throwing them out, but something stopped her. Each one felt important somehow. Like pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she was assembling. She brought them to a dentist, finally, under the guise of a found object, curiosity. The dentist frowned as he examined them under a magnifying lamp. "These are all real human teeth," he said. "Most are adult molars, but this one..." He held up the smallest yellowed one with a rounded edge. "This one looks like it came from a child, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Can you tell how old they are? I mean, how long they've been out of a mouth?" He looked at her oddly. "Hard to say exactly, but they're all fresh. Within a week, I'd guess." Rachel swallowed. She didn't tell him there were more. That night, she dreamed again. She was sitting in a dimly lit room with no windows. Her hands were sticky with something she couldn't see, and in front of her was a tray. Neatly arranged on it were teeth. Rows and rows, some cracked, some whole, all gleaming faintly in the dark. She reached out, took one, and began to chew. When she woke, her mouth was sore again. But this time, she could taste blood. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Drain. The morning after the blood-taste dream, Rachel brushed her teeth 3 times. Her gums were raw, irritated, but she didn't care. She spit into the sink and stared down at the frothy pink mess, watching it swirl down the drain. She didn't expect to hear it whisper, just a breath. Faint, like air sliding across the back of her neck. But it was a word. A single syllable. Chew. Rachel backed away from the sink, toothbrush still in hand. She stared into the dark pipe, her reflection warped in the chrome. The sound didn't come again, but when she turned off the faucet, the drain gurgled, as if trying to speak again. She left the bathroom door open that day. Every so often she'd glance down the hall, waiting for the sound. It never repeated itself. Not that day. That night, she found another tooth. This time it was in her coat pocket, one she hadn't worn in weeks. She picked it up with tweezers, held it under the light. It was different, older, more worn, with a blackened root. The kind you might expect from a long-buried corpse. She added it to the jar. Tooth number 8, Wednesday, April 10th, coat pocket, unworn. The dreams returned, not every night, but when they came, they were vivid. Always the same room, always the tray. Sometimes she was alone, sometimes she wasn't. One night, she dreamed of a girl, maybe 10, 11 years old, pale, hair matted with something dark and sticky. The girl didn't speak, didn't move. She just opened her mouth wide, wider than was natural, teeth missing, gums torn, blood dripping down her chin. Rachel couldn't move in the dream, could only watch. Then the girl smiled. Rachel woke screaming. Her jaw ached like she'd been chewing rocks. Her molars felt loose. She ran to the bathroom. Her reflection stared back at her, haggard and pale. She opened her mouth, counted. Still 32. But she didn't believe it anymore. That day, she unplugged the bathroom sink and removed the curved metal pipe underneath. A desperate urge told her to check. It was there, lodged deep in the S-bend. Tooth number 9, it was hers. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Drain. The morning after the blood-taste dream, Rachel brushed her teeth 3 times. Her gums were raw, irritated, but she didn't care. She spit into the sink and stared down at the frothy pink mess, watching it swirl down the drain. She didn't expect to hear it whisper, just a breath. Faint, like air sliding across the back of her neck. But it was a word, a single syllable. Chew. Rachel backed away from the sink, toothbrush still in hand. She stared into the dark pipe, her reflection warped in the chrome. The sound didn't come again, but when she turned off the faucet, the drain gurgled, as if trying to speak again. She left the bathroom door open that day. Every so often she'd glance down the hall, waiting for the sound. It never repeated itself. Not that day. That night she found another tooth. This time it was in her coat pocket, one she hadn't worn in weeks. She picked it up with tweezers, held it under the light. It was different, older, more worn, with a blackened root. The kind you might expect from a long-buried corpse. She added it to the jar. Tooth number 8, Wednesday, April 10th, coat pocket, unworn. The dreams returned. Not every night, but when they came, they were vivid. Always the same room, always the tray. Sometimes she was alone, sometimes she wasn't. One night, she dreamed of a girl, maybe 10, 11 years old, pale, hair matted with something dark and sticky. The girl didn't speak, didn't move. She just opened her mouth wide, wider than was natural. Teeth missing, gums torn, blood dripping down her chin. Rachel couldn't move in the dream, could only watch. Then the girl smiled. Rachel woke screaming. Her jaw ached like she'd been chewing rocks. Her molars felt loose. She ran to the bathroom. Her reflection stared back at her, haggard and pale. She opened her mouth, counted. Still 32. but she didn't believe it anymore. That day, she unplugged the bathroom sink and removed the curved metal pipe underneath. A desperate urge told her to check. It was there, lodged deep in the S-bend. Tooth number 9. It was hers. Chapter 4. Her smile, my smile. Rachel didn't open the jar for 3 days. She moved it to the top shelf of the linen closet and stacked towels around it. She taped the door shut, but she still heard it. Click, click, teeth tapping against glass, like fingers drumming a rhythm only the dead knew. The girl in the dreams had started to whisper. Rachel couldn't make out the words. They sounded like static, like something underwater. But the voice was getting closer each time. Softer, yes, but more urgent, more alive. That night, Rachel looked into the mirror and didn't recognize her smile. Her lips curled, but it wasn't hers. She tried to stop the movement, but her face didn't listen. Her eyes remained fixed, mouth stretched into something hungry, something amused. She slapped herself hard. The smile vanished. She didn't go to work the next day, didn't answer emails. She unplugged her computer, removed the battery from her phone. She taped a thick black sheet over the bathroom mirror, but the tap-tap-tap from the linen closet never stopped. On the 4th night, she dreamt of pulling a tooth from her own mouth. It slid out like it had never been rooted, leaving a clean, dark gap. She woke with her hands in her mouth, fingers bloody, still 32. But she didn't believe it. That morning, she threw the jar into the dumpster behind the building, watched it shatter against metal, white shards scattering like bone confetti. Relief came, sharp and sudden. She laughed. But that night, the knock came again. Not at the door, from inside the apartment, from the linen closet. Rachel stared at the taped door. Her legs wouldn't move, her feet rooted to the floor. The knock repeated, faint, like fingernails on wood. She peeled away the tape, slowly, her breath shallow. Opened the door. The towels were folded perfectly, and in the center, upright and whole, was the jar, lid sealed, with 12 teeth inside. Chapter 5. Where the teeth come from. She had to know. Rachel didn't sleep, didn't eat. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes fixed on the jar. The teeth inside had started to change. They no longer looked like old random specimens. Now they were clean, aligned, like a child's collection, souvenirs of a gruesome game. Her own reflection no longer matched. Her face, the mirror in the hallway, one she had forgotten to cover, showed her eyes too wide, her mouth subtly twitching at the corners, like it wanted to grin even when she didn't. She placed the jar in the center of the floor, lit candles around it, not out of ritual, out of desperation. She opened her laptop and began searching. Dental anomalies, tooth fairies, folklore, ritual sacrifice, paranormal extractions, possessions. None of it sounded ridiculous anymore. Then she found a thread on an obscure forum. Title: They Took My Smile. The user had vanished 3 years ago, but their posts remained. They come through mirrors, sometimes drains. They only take from those who won't be missed. They feed on teeth. Teeth are memory, teeth are essence. Rachel read every word. There were others in the replies, whispering in text form, all gone dark, all accounts inactive. One message read, they use the jar to keep count. Once they have enough, you switch. Switch? The jar rattled. The 12th tooth floated to the top. Rachel's stomach turned. She crawled backward across the floor, her hands trembling. The bathroom mirror, the one she had covered, shattered. Not with a bang, with a hum, like a voice vibrating in the bones of the walls. She approached it, barefoot on broken glass. Her reflection wasn't her. It was the girl, pale, hollow-eyed, grinning. Rachel screamed, but the reflection didn't. The girl in the mirror leaned forward, opened her mouth, teeth missing, gums raw. Then, slowly, she raised one hand. In her palm, gleaming and white, was a tooth. Rachel's tooth. Chapter 6, 13. Rachel locked every door in her apartment. Not just the front door. Closet doors, cabinets, even the fridge. She turned her bed against the wall to block the bathroom, as if wood and metal could keep a reflection from returning. She avoided mirrors, reflective surfaces. Even the shine on her kettle made her flinch. She wore sunglasses indoors, kept the lights dim, but still, she felt watched. The jar sat in the center of the room. She didn't touch it, didn't speak to it, but she knew it was listening, waiting. That night, she dreamed again. She was inside the mirror. She stood where the girl once was, except she wasn't Rachel anymore. Her hands were smaller, her skin bruised, her gums ached, and every time she opened her mouth, a tooth dropped out. Clink, clink, a trail of white on the dark floor. She turned, saw herself, the real Rachel, on the other side of the glass, asleep on the floor, mouth open, breathing shallow. The girl in the mirror reached out. So did Rachel. Fingertips nearly touched. And then, the jar tipped. She woke, gasping. The jar was shattered. Not tipped, not moved. Shattered. Teeth were everywhere, lined up in rows on the floor, perfectly spaced, all pointing toward her like compass needles. 12 teeth, but there was a 13th space. Empty. Rachel crawled to the sink, pulled herself up, and looked in the mirror. The gap was there. Bottom row, third from the left. Gone. She didn't remember losing it. Didn't feel it come out, but the blood on her chin said it had. Her smile wavered, warped. The 13th tooth sat on her pillow. Small, sharp, fresh, with her name scratched into the root. Chapter 7. Inside the smile. The gap in Rachel's teeth felt enormous. She couldn't stop probing it with her tongue. Couldn't stop feeling the sharp edges where her tooth once was. The exposed gum throbbed, raw and pulsing like an open wound. Every breath over it was agony. Every word she spoke felt like it echoed from that hole. She didn't leave the apartment, didn't shower. She taped every reflective surface, even her windows. Black construction paper covered them in jagged patches. Her phone remained off. Her computer unplugged. All light came from a single bulb dangling in the kitchen, and the jar was gone. She hadn't moved it, hadn't swept up the shattered glass, or the teeth that had lined themselves in ritual precision. But when she woke, the floor was clear. No sign of the mess, no blood, no tooth on the pillow. She laughed, a short, high-pitched sound. It wasn't relief, it was resignation. They were cleaning up after themselves now. Rachel sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers trembling as she opened the leather-bound notebook, the one where she had documented every tooth. She flipped through the pages. They were blank, not scratched out, not torn, just gone. The ink faded to white, as if it had never been there. She tried to write. The pen didn't work. She tried another. Nothing. The paper would not take ink anymore. The house creaked around her, but it wasn't wood shifting. It was breath. Rhythmic. Patient. Waiting. Rachel stood up and walked to the bathroom. She pulled down the black tarp covering the mirror. Her hands were steady. Her reflection stared back. The girl was gone. Only Rachel. Her face. But her eyes were dull. Her cheeks sunken. Her smile. Her smile didn't stop. Even as she tried to frown, the corners of her mouth curled upward, her lips parted. A faint giggle escaped, and she saw it, another gap, top row this time. No blood, no pain. The teeth were taking themselves now. Rachel opened her mouth wide, stared into the mirror, and saw something move. Not her. Behind her, the girl, smiling, closer than ever, whispering something she could finally understand. "You were always mine." Rachel turned. No one was there. But on the floor, glinting in the light, was tooth number 14. Chapter 8. The Collector. There were 14 now. Rachel lined them on the windowsill, even though the windows were sealed. She didn't know why. Some part of her wanted them to see, to be displayed, to count. She had stopped brushing her teeth, stopped eating solid food. Her gums were tender, inflamed. They pulsed in time with a pressure that never faded, like something was building underneath the surface, waiting to erupt. She hadn't heard the girl in days, but she felt her, all the time. In the corners, in the backs of mirrors, in the static between radio stations, even though the radio was unplugged. Rachel began to hum, a strange, low lullaby she didn't remember learning. She hummed it while she bathed in cold water, hummed it while counting her teeth, hummed it while staring at the blank pages of her notebook. And every time she reached the end of the melody, a single word floated into her mind: more. It wasn't a command, it was a need. She opened her old shoebox of family photos, searching for faces, anyone she could remember, anyone who smiled too wide. Her parents? Gone, dead in a car crash when she was a teenager. Her foster homes? Blank. She couldn't recall. Names, faces. Nothing stayed in her mind, only the jar, only the teeth, and the girl. Rachel looked at herself in the mirror again. Gaps now spanned the top and bottom rows. Her smile was jagged, crooked, and she could feel it widening on its own, cheeks stretching farther than skin should allow. She snapped a photo of herself with an old Polaroid, shook it, let it develop. The image came out black, except for the smile, white, floating, disembodied. She burned the photo in the sink, watched the smile curl and crumple into ash. But in the flame's final flicker, it smiled back. That night, Rachel went to the bathroom with a pair of pliers. She didn't remember why, only that it felt right. She stood before the mirror. The girl was waiting, silent now, but approving. Rachel opened her mouth, inserted the pliers, gripped, twisted, pulled. Tooth number 15 hit the floor, and Rachel finally understood. She wasn't losing her teeth, she was collecting them for someone else. Chapter 9. The Mirrors. Mouth the mirror was no longer just glass. It pulsed. Rachel felt it every time she passed. A magnetic tug at the back of her skull, a pressure behind her eyes. As if something on the other side was trying to pull her reflection away and wear it like skin. The teeth now numbered 17. She didn't remember removing 2 more, but they were there, lined up in the sink like offerings. Rachel's mouth was a wound, a yawning red chasm. Her lips barely closed around the gaps anymore. Her tongue felt too large. Her jaw ached constantly, stretched into a smile she couldn't control. She no longer cried. There was no sadness, no fear, only the need to finish, the need to collect. She began scratching tally marks into the bathroom wall. Every time she saw the girl, she was up to 23, and the girl was always closer. Now she whispered during the day, whispered when Rachel blinked, whispered from behind closed drawers, faucets, cabinet hinges. Always the same phrase. Almost enough. Rachel began to smile at strangers on the street below from her window. She didn't wave, just smiled. She wasn't sure how many teeth she had left. One night, she opened the mirror. Not metaphorically, it gave. Her fingers pressed against it and the glass rippled, cool and soft like water. She stepped through. The room on the other side was her apartment, but wrong. Everything was reversed, twisted, stretched, as if built for someone with different proportions. The girl was waiting. She sat in Rachel's chair, wearing Rachel's clothes, holding the jar. It was full. 32. Rachel reached for her own mouth, felt only gums. Nothing left. The girl stood and smiled. Not cruelly, not kindly, just with purpose. Rachel stepped forward. The jar was warm in her hands. The girl faded, her voice echoing one last time. Now you keep count. Rachel looked at the jar. A tooth appeared inside it. She didn't know whose, but she smiled and waited. Chapter 10. The One Who Smiles Back. There's a new woman in apartment 2B. The old bookstore owner says she's quiet, pays on time, keeps to herself, real polite. Smiles a lot, always smiling. No one's seen her bring furniture in, no moving truck. Just appeared one day, lights on by evening, curtains drawn by morning. Sometimes neighbors say they hear humming, a soft, broken lullaby. Familiar but wrong, she never answers the door. She walks barefoot to the mailbox every Tuesday at 3 a.m., always 3 a.m. Her hair is long, stringy, her eyes dull and unblinking. Her lips cracked from the cold, but that smile never changes. One neighbor swears they caught a glimpse through her window, saw her sitting in the middle of the room surrounded by candles, holding something. A glass jar. With teeth. Perfectly clean, perfectly arranged, 32 of them. She was whispering to it, or maybe it was whispering to her. Last week, a little girl in the building disappeared. Police combed the neighborhood. Nothing. No signs of struggle. No prints. No trail. Her parents said the last thing she asked was, "Do I have to leave my tooth under the pillow tonight?" They said she hadn't lost any. They checked. All baby teeth were still there. The next morning, one was missing, and in its place, on the nightstand, was a photograph of a smile, unmistakable, too wide, too knowing, too Rachel. Now when people walk past 2B, they quicken their step. They avoid looking into the peephole. No one complains about noise anymore. Sometimes they say the mailbox opens by itself. And if you walk by just after 3 a.m., you might hear the faint clink of something small and hard, dropping into glass. New collection has begun. And somewhere, behind a mirror that isn't a mirror, someone is waiting to smile back. If this story sent a chill down your spine, we invite you to subscribe to Crazy Real Horror Stories, where true terror lives in every whisper, every shadow, and every reflection. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new nightmare. And remember, next time you see a smile that's too wide, too still, don't smile back. Story: They left the light on. There was no reason to be alarmed at first. After all, it was just a porch light. When Erin pulled into the gravel driveway of the mountain cabin she had booked for the weekend, the orange porch bulb was already glowing through the thick dusk. She even smiled at it, comforted somehow by the soft glow in the otherwise lonely wilderness. The listing had promised privacy, no nearby neighbors, no cell service, just tall trees, cold air, and silence. And she needed that silence. After everything that had happened back home, she was desperate to get away. To be somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could reach her. A place where her thoughts could settle like dust. So no, she wasn't concerned that the light was already on, not at first. She used the keypad code sent by the host, entered it, heard the beep, and walked inside. The air smelled of cedar, like the cabin had been sealed for months. No food, no signs of anyone. Just her and the pine wood walls. She unpacked, made tea, sat by the fireplace, slept. She turned the porch light off before going to bed. She was sure of that, and yet, the next night, it was on again. Intro. The first night. There was no reason to be alarmed at first. After all, it was just a porch light. When Erin pulled into the gravel driveway of the mountain cabin she had booked for the weekend, the orange porch bulb was already glowing through the thick dusk. She even smiled at it, comforted somehow by the soft glow in the otherwise lonely wilderness. The listing had promised privacy, no nearby neighbors, no cell service, just tall trees, cold air, and silence. And she needed that silence. After everything that had happened back home, she was desperate to get away, to be somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could reach her. A place where her thoughts could settle like dust. So no, she wasn't concerned that the light was already on, not at first. She used the keypad code sent by the host, entered it, heard the beep, and walked inside. The air smelled of cedar, like the cabin had been sealed for months. No food, no signs of anyone. Just her and the pine wood walls. She unpacked, made tea, sat by the fireplace, slept. She turned the porch light off before going to bed. She was sure of that, and yet, the next night, it was on again. Chapter 1. No one else booked this week. Erin had always found something reassuring about routines. She kept them tight, not rigid exactly, but intentional. She tracked her sleep, kept timers for hydration, and even made a small list each night of 5 things she was grateful for. Therapist's suggestion. The kind of stuff you cling to when your life unravels in pieces you can't name aloud. So when she noticed the porch light on that second evening, a small tremor passed through that controlled world. She paused, standing in the kitchen doorway, coffee mug pressed against her lips. Outside the window, just beyond the deck, the bulb glowed again. Warm, orange, humming low against the silence. It was subtle, a little off. A whisper in the bones that said, "This is wrong." But Erin did what she always did with discomfort. She explained it away. Maybe she hadn't turned it off like she remembered. Memory was strange. It fractured under stress. And this was supposed to be a recovery trip. She slipped on her boots and stepped onto the porch. The air was sharper tonight, colder. The sky overhead was moonless and star-thick, stretching far beyond the trees like a dark ocean frozen in place. She looked at the bulb. No insects, no flickering, just a steady, patient glow. The switch was just inside the door. She toggled it. Click. The light snapped off. Erin exhaled, smiled to herself, and went back inside. The fire had died down. She stirred the embers, added another log, and curled into the blanket-wrapped chair by the stone hearth. Her book was still open to the page she'd dog-eared, but the words didn't hold the same gravity. Her thoughts kept circling the light. It had to be a mistake. Still, she got up, checked the switch again. Off. Satisfied, she made a fresh pot of chamomile tea and sat back down, watching the flames crawl up the wood like dancers. At some point, she dozed off. A sound woke her. Sharp, mechanical. Click. She sat upright. The clock on the mantel read 3:17 a.m. She turned toward the window. The porch light was on. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Not the usual quiet of night, but a listening kind of silence. Like the space around her was holding its breath. Erin moved slowly to the front door, her bare feet padded over the old wood floor. She stood in the entryway, staring at the switch, still off. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold bit at her skin, slicing through the fabric of her pajama pants. Her eyes adjusted to the glare. Nothing moved, no wind, no wildlife. But the bulb trembled slightly in its socket, not from movement, but something else. A hum just under the edge of sound, like static building inside her skull. She stepped back in and shut the door. This time she didn't touch the switch. Instead, she sat on the couch and waited. 2 hours passed. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no knocks, no flickers, just the light burning steady. At dawn, she made coffee with shaking hands and checked her phone. Still no signal. She opened the Airbnb app on a whim. Her reservation was still active. Everything looked normal. She wrote a message to the host. "Hey, just curious, was someone here before me this week? Porch light was already on when I arrived, and it turned itself back on last night. Just wanted to check in. Thanks." She hit send. Message status, sent. She left the phone on the kitchen counter and went to take a shower. When she came back 20 minutes later, the message was gone. Not just unsent, erased, like she'd never typed it at all. Chapter 2. The Journal in the Drawer. By morning, Erin's nerves had settled. Just a little. She chalked it all up to travel fatigue, residual anxiety, maybe even the altitude. But somewhere inside her, that tiny crack of uncertainty had widened overnight. She spent the morning cleaning. It wasn't messy really, just dusty. The kind of settled dust that only forms when a place hasn't been occupied for a while. She wiped down the counters, shook out old throw blankets, opened a few windows to let in the sharp mountain air. That was when she found the drawer. It was tucked into the side of an old cabinet near the back hallway. A drawer she hadn't noticed yesterday. The handle was thin brass, almost invisible against the wood grain. Inside there was only one item, a leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, cracked at the edges, with a single word carved faintly into the bottom right corner, "Guests." Erin hesitated, then picked it up. The leather felt strange against her skin, too cold, despite the warmth of the room. She flipped it open. The first few pages were harmless. Guest names, brief notes of thanks, the kind of thing you'd expect in a vacation rental. "Thanks for the cozy weekend. Loved the view from the back deck. Such a peaceful stay. Hope to come back next spring. The stars out here are unreal. Saw a bear, Lowell. Be safe." Then the entries changed. Who left the light on? Second night, light was off when I went to bed. On when I woke up. No wind, no storm. I didn't hear anything. But I know it wasn't on. The porch light comes on at 3:17 every night. I've stopped turning it off. Erin stopped reading. Her fingers trembled slightly as she closed the book. She looked around the room. Everything was still. Still and watching. She took the journal with her and sat at the kitchen table, flipping back further. The older entries were faded, some of them nearly illegible. One name came up again and again. Kay. Kay said to leave the door unlocked. Kay was outside last night. Didn't knock. Just stood in the light. Kay says the light chooses, not me. The last entry was scrawled with a shaking hand. Don't go under the house. It knows when you do. Erin closed the journal and pushed it away. Her eyes darted toward the corner of the cabin where a rug lay slightly askew. A bump underneath. Something hard. She didn't move it. Not yet. Instead, she checked the drawer again. There was something else. A slip of paper folded and yellowed. She opened it slowly. It read, "If the light comes on again, leave immediately." That night, Erin left the switch alone. She didn't try to control it. She sat in the living room with the fire dying down, the journal in her lap. At 3:17 a.m., the porch light clicked on, and something scraped across the floorboards underneath her. Chapter 3. Glitch in the Listing. The next morning brought a deceptive calm. Sunlight broke through the trees in long golden beams, making the cabin feel almost normal. cozy even. Birds chirped. The fire was out. The air smelled faintly of pine and dust. Erin didn't feel calm. She hadn't slept. Not really. She dozed, for short bursts, never fully surrendering to rest. The scraping noise under the floor had stopped after about 10 minutes, but the silence that followed was worse. It felt intentional, like whatever had been beneath her was simply waiting. She drank her coffee in silence, staring at the rug. She didn't dare lift it yet. Instead, she turned her attention to the one thing that might tether her to the outside world, the Airbnb app. To her surprise, she had signal, a faint bar just enough. She tapped into the listing. The cabin's profile loaded slowly. She exhaled. Relief hit her all at once. But the photos were different. She swiped through them. The living room shot. Same angle, but the rug was gone. The kitchen shot. Her red coffee mug sat on the counter. Her red coffee mug. She felt the hair on her neck rise. She hadn't uploaded anything. There was no way they could have. Then the listing vanished. It blinked out of existence. The error screen loaded. Listing no longer available. She refreshed. Again. Gone. She tapped on the host's profile. The name was there. Host K. But there was no profile picture. No listings. No reviews. Just a blank page with a single line. User not found. Her hands shook. She opened her messages. The thread she'd sent? Gone. No history. Like she'd never contacted them at all. The bar of signal dropped. Back to no service. She turned off the phone and stared at the blank screen. What was this place? A thought occurred to her, one that made her stomach turn. She opened the journal again, flipped to the back. Pages torn. But near the very end, one entry caught her eye. It was different from the others, more deliberate. The listing changes. Photos update. Every guest becomes part of the next ad. That's how it keeps them coming. Erin slammed the book shut. She was already part of it. That night, she heard something new. Not scraping, a knock. 3 slow, hollow taps on the back door, and, just beyond it, the porch light turned on. Chapter 4. The Locked Door. She didn't answer the knock. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, frozen, her breath caught in her throat. 3 slow taps. Measured. Not frantic, not aggressive, like someone who knew she was there, and knew she would listen. The knock didn't come again. Erin stayed awake until dawn. She sat in the corner of the living room, clutching the cold journal like it could protect her. The fire remained unlit. The porch light burned all night. When morning came, she waited for the light to fade. It didn't. It stayed on even as the sun climbed above the tree line. That warm orange glow, out of place in the daylight, cast a sickly hue over the porch. She made coffee. Her hands trembled as she poured it. Then, finally, she peeled back the rug. The bump she'd been avoiding was a square wooden hatch. Old, rough. The kind of trapdoor you'd expect in a horror movie, complete with rusted hinges and a metal ring, bolted into the center. No lock. Just a hatch. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she searched the rest of the cabin. Room by room. The bathroom was clean, sparse. An old clawfoot tub. A medicine cabinet with no mirror. She noticed the missing glass immediately. There was dust where the mirror should be, as if it had been removed a long time ago and no one bothered replacing it. She checked the bedroom. Nothing strange. The bed was made, the sheets tucked tight like no one had ever slept there. The closet was empty except for a single wire hanger. Then, she found the second door, tucked behind a tall bookshelf in the hallway. Barely visible was a narrow door set into the wall at shoulder height. Too small to walk through, more like a crawl space. No knob, just a latch and a padlock. Her stomach turned. The key wasn't anywhere in sight. She knelt, pressed her ear to the wood. Nothing. But when she reached out to touch the lock, she felt warmth. It wasn't cold metal. It had body heat. She recoiled and backed away. That night, the knock came again. This time it came from the floor, beneath her. 3 slow taps, as if someone inside the crawl space was knocking on the bottom of the floorboards. The light clicked on and stayed on. Chapter 5. Someone's been watching. It wasn't just the knocks, it was how deliberate they had become. 3 slow raps from under the floor, and then nothing. No footsteps, no voice. Just the oppressive weight of being known, seen, by something she couldn't explain. Erin didn't sleep that night. She sat in the hallway, just outside the crawl space door, back pressed to the cold wood, journal on her lap, flashlight in her hand. Every so often she'd shine the beam down toward the baseboards, just to check, just to reassure herself she was still alone. By morning, her nerves had started to unravel. She paced the cabin, checked and rechecked every window, every door, every corner. The hatch beneath the rug stayed closed. The locked door behind the bookshelf remained warm. But something had changed. A photo. She found it tucked into the spine of the journal. A Polaroid. It hadn't been there before. The image was grainy and slightly underexposed. It showed the living room, the couch, the fireplace, and her asleep. Mouth slightly open. Head turned to the side, the same blanket draped over her shoulders. The night she fell asleep by the fire. Erin stared at it, heart pounding. She didn't own a Polaroid camera. There were no guests, no neighbors. Someone had been inside the cabin. She dropped the photo, backed away. Her mind screamed at her to run. But where? No signal, no car. The nearest town was over an hour's drive, and she'd taken a rideshare just to get here. A one-way ride she had planned to reverse at the end of the week. She went to the bookshelf, moved it completely. The crawlspace door loomed in the wall. The padlock was gone, just an open latch. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the door open. It groaned loudly, wood scraping against wood. Dust fell from the frame. She hesitated, then reached for the flashlight again. Inside was a narrow tunnel, cramped, barely wide enough to crawl through, lined with wooden beams and cobwebs. Something glinted at the end of the passage. A box. She took a deep breath and crawled in. It was colder inside. Damp. The tunnel twisted slightly, then widened into a small chamber. Wooden crates lined the walls. Erin pulled one open. Inside, more Polaroids, dozens, all showing guests, different people, men, women, children, all caught mid-action, cooking, brushing teeth, reading, some asleep, some standing and staring directly into the lens. Her stomach turned. Another crate, cassette tapes, each one labeled with a name and a date. She dug deeper. At the bottom of the final crate was a folder labeled Confirmed. Inside were missing person reports, all of them dated years apart. All of them listed the same last known location, though cabin. She turned to crawl back and froze. At the mouth of the tunnel, just beyond the reach of her flashlight's beam, was a new photograph. It showed her inside the crawl space, reaching for the flashlight. Chapter 6. The Light That Chooses. Erin didn't leave the crawl space for hours. She sat frozen, flashlight still in hand, staring at the Polaroid that hadn't been there seconds ago. The photo didn't make sense, not just because of what it showed, but because of what it meant. Someone had taken it while she was crawling in, and she hadn't seen or heard a single thing. That realization settled over her like frost, numbing everything. Logic fractured. Time slowed. Her breathing shallowed. The cabin, this place, was not just haunted. It was conscious. When she finally emerged, blinking into the dim morning light bleeding through the windows, the house felt different. Not colder, not darker, just more aware. She stood in the center of the living room and turned in a slow circle. Everything was still where she left it. The fire out, the journal on the coffee table, the curtains slightly open. And yet it felt rearranged, off by fractions, tilted frames, shifted shadows. Then she noticed the light. The porch light was on. Even though it was morning, Erin stepped closer to the window, heart thudding. She flicked the switch on and off repeatedly. Nothing happened. The light stayed on. That night, she set up a plan. She had no weapons, no signal, no way to call for help. But she had a camera on her phone and enough battery to record. She positioned it on the window ledge, aimed squarely at the porch. She left all the lights in the cabin off, sat in darkness, waiting. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the porch light blinked. Once, twice. Then, turned off for the first time in days. Erin leaned forward, confused. Then she saw it. A silhouette. Not standing on the porch, standing in the light. It wasn't close to the cabin. It was about 20 feet back, just within the ring of illumination. A tall, motionless figure. No defining features, no sound. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching. Erin reached for her phone. Hands trembling, she stopped the recording. When she turned back to the window, the light had gone out. The figure was gone. She reviewed the footage immediately. Her phone screen went black the moment the light flickered. The recording was just static. She checked the gallery. The file wasn't there. Instead, in its place, a single photo of the porch with her standing in the light. Chapter 7. Beneath the floorboards. Erin barely moved the next day. She sat curled up in the corner of the couch, wrapped in 2 blankets, staring at the journal resting on the coffee table. It didn't matter that the sun had come up. It didn't matter that the fire was warm or that the cabin looked unchanged. The light had chosen her. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. She kept thinking about the silhouette in the glow, not the way it looked, but the way it didn't. It had no outline, no substance, and yet its presence pressed into her like a thumb against wet clay. She opened the journal, again, looking for a name, a clue, something to follow. One entry stood out, almost hidden in the margins. Underneath is older than the cabin. It came first. The rest was built around it. We're the guests. That thought wouldn't leave her. The crawl space wasn't the only thing below her. She crossed the living room and stood above the rug where the hatch was. The square outline in the wood stared back. She slid the rug aside and pulled open the hatch. Darkness greeted her. It wasn't like the crawlspace tunnel. This was deeper, earthier. A drop, not a crawl. There were old wooden rungs nailed into the side, descending into blackness. She hadn't noticed them before. She lowered herself slowly. The air grew damp. Cold. Stale. Like something sealed for decades. Her feet touched dirt. Packed, dry, cracked like skin. She raised her flashlight. The chamber was larger than she expected. Wider. It extended under the entire cabin. The floor was dirt. The walls braced with beams. And carved into the center was a circle. Etched symbols lined the perimeter. Some recent, some ancient. Scratches, marks. Deep grooves like teeth had scraped the soil itself. In the circle sat a chair, old, wooden, high-backed, like a throne from somewhere forgotten, and on the chair, a photo album. She stepped forward slowly. Every instinct in her body screamed to stop, but she couldn't. She picked it up and opened to the first page. Photos, Polaroids. Again, each with a name written underneath. Catherine, Greg, Mia, Teresa, Owen, James. Each face looked surprised, or afraid, or vacant. At the end, a blank space. A photo slot empty. Beneath it, Erin. She dropped the album, turned, ran for the ladder. As she reached the top, she saw the hatch begin to swing shut on its own. She dove through just in time. The porch light was already on. Chapter 8. The Guest Who Never Left. She packed. Not because she had a plan. There was nowhere to go, no signal to call a ride, no escape without walking miles through dark forest. But packing gave her hands something to do, something to pretend was useful. She shoved clothes into her backpack, grabbed her toothbrush, phone, flashlight, the journal. Her charger was gone, just vanished, like it had never existed. She didn't remember unplugging it, didn't remember using it. She didn't remember a lot anymore. That night she didn't sit in the dark. She turned on every light in the cabin. She played music from her phone on low volume. She made tea, poured it out, made another cup, poured that one out too. She checked the window constantly. At 3:17 the lights in the cabin dimmed all at once. The music distorted, warbled like a cassette tape melting in the sun, then silence. The porch light clicked on, and she heard footsteps. Not from outside. Upstairs, but there was no upstairs. Not that she remembered. The sound moved across the ceiling like someone pacing, deliberate, steady, back and forth. She backed into the corner of the living room, picked up the flashlight. The journal had fallen open. A new entry had appeared, written in her handwriting. She'll arrive tomorrow. The light is ready. Her blood went cold. The door creaked. Not the front door, not the crawl space, the hatch beneath the rug. Slowly it began to lift, just a few inches, enough for air to spill out. Stale, rotten, breathing. She ran to the kitchen, gripped the largest knife she could find, turned, waited. Nothing came through the hatch. Instead, her phone lit up, a message from an unknown number. Thanks for leaving it ready. The photo that followed showed the cabin from outside, taken seconds ago from the tree line, and in the porch light's glow was a second silhouette. Not the figure from before. Her, smiling, waiting. Chapter 9. Someone else is booked. Erin didn't recognize herself in the mirror anymore. Not because her face had changed, but because she couldn't remember what it used to look like. She stared at the dim reflection in the cracked glass of the oven door, the only reflective surface left in the cabin. Her skin looked pale, her eyes distant, her mouth smiling. She hadn't meant to smile, but it was there, fixed, like it had been carved into her. The next morning the light was still on. She stopped checking the switch. It didn't matter. The journal, now updated without her touching it. Every time she opened it, new handwriting appeared. Hers, but also not hers. She stopped reading after it began describing things she hadn't done yet. Then she saw the car. It came up the winding dirt path in the late afternoon. Red, dust-covered, a young woman in the driver's seat, talking on her phone, smiling. Erin didn't move. She watched from the bedroom window hidden by the curtain. The woman parked, got out, stretched, looked up at the porch. The light was on. She walked to the door. Erin heard the keypad beep. The code still worked. The door opened. Erin stepped back into the shadows. The woman called out, cheerful. "Hello?" No answer. She wandered through the cabin, admired the view, commented aloud to herself. "Such a cozy place. Smells like cedar." Erin stood in the crawl space just behind the bookshelf, quiet, holding the flashlight, watching. The woman walked past, never saw her. Later, Erin stood outside just beyond the porch. The new guest turned off the light before bed, and at 3:17 a.m. the light turned on again, and Erin was gone. Chapter 10. The porch light was on. The new guest's name was Claire. She had driven in from 2 states away, eager for a weekend of quiet. Her job was stressful, her apartment noisy, and her phone always buzzing. The idea of a signal-free, off-the-grid cabin in the woods sounded like salvation. And when she pulled into the gravel driveway, it was everything the listing promised. Charming, remote, peaceful. The porch light was on. She thought nothing of it. Just a thoughtful touch from the host. The key code worked on the first try. The door creaked open. Inside smelled like cedar and something older. The floorboards were worn in a comforting way. Everything looked recently cleaned. She noticed a small journal on the coffee table but didn't open it. She unpacked, made a cup of tea, and stood on the porch for a while, listening to the breeze through the pines. It was exactly what she needed. That night, she turned off the porch light before going to bed. She was sure of it. She curled up under the heavy blanket, read a few pages of her book, and drifted into sleep. At 3:17 a.m., the porch light turned on. Claire didn't notice, but something else did. From the edge of the trees, 2 figures watched. One stayed in the dark, the other stepped into the glow. Claire stirred in her sleep. The journal on the coffee table flipped open, pages turning on their own until it landed on a blank page. Ink bled up from the paper. A single sentence. She turned it off, and beneath it, "She's ready." Outside, the figure in the light smiled and waited.